Well, ECOWAS had agreed on a D-Day for a possible military intervention to restore democracy in Niger, adding that such a date would not be disclosed yet. Defense chiefs from the bloc met for 2 days of talks in Ghana to discuss a possible military intervention following last month's coup. They had been trying to thrash out logistics and strategy for the potential use of force in Niger. Still, sub-regional leaders insist that military action only be considered a last resort.
I would like to remind us all that the purpose of our gathering is not simply to react to events, but to proactively chart a course that preserves peace, promotes stability, and upholds democratic principles across our region. We must remember that our collective actions today will shape the legacy we leave for future generations.
Let no one be in doubt that if everything else fails, the valiant forces of West Africa, both the military and the civilian components, are ready to answer to the call of duty. So this is the determination that I want to put across here as we meet today, to fine-tune and then also to plan about the timing, about order. Meanwhile, we are still giving diplomacy a chance. The ball is in the court of the junta, the CNSP, in Niger. If they pull back from the brink, the military option will not be necessary. But we want to warn them that all options are on the table, and no option is off the table.
Well, the drums of war continue unabated, but for much needed introspection around those stories, I'm now being joined from Arise Lagos studios by Ambassador Keshi, a seasoned diplomat who, during his days in active service, traveled down the familiar routes of reconciliation and statesmanship on behalf of Nigeria to so many times. Ambassador Keshi is a former Nigerian Consul General at the country's diplomatic mission in Atlanta, Georgia. Ambassador Keshi, good to see you and thanks for your time. Well, these are trying times to the extent that almost everyone in the country is trying to think like a diplomat because they say no one wants war. Now, help us make sense of what exactly we're dealing with to the extent that the ordinary Nigerian will have a fair understanding.
Well, thank you, Suleiman, for having me. I think the best way for the ordinary Nigerian to understand what is going on is for those of us who are familiar with what's going on to continue to explain, to them and to urge particularly the authorities to consider every point of view that is being put on the table, particularly the desire or the need to give enough time for the diplomatic option to and to some of the sanctions that have been imposed against Niger to work. Let me say, first of all, that sanctions do work. We have seen where sanctions have worked, and from some reports coming out of Niger, the sanctions that have been imposed even by Nigeria is working. The second point that we need to understand, is the fact that what has emerged from Niger in the last couple of days about spending 3 years. ECOWAS leaders should not misinterpret what the Nigerian leadership of today, what they are doing. It's what they have said about 3 years. I can assure you it is not sacrosanct. It is their negotiating position. That's where they want to start from. And so it is now left for ECOWAS to engage them to see whether they can grant them lesser years or they can find a better way of telling them to quickly organize another election and install whoever they want to, install or elect. So it is a negotiating position that they have offered to ECOWAS. It is now left whether ECOWAS would have to accept it or not. The third point I want to make is about the statement coming from Accra. I think I want to remind the military chiefs. Unfortunately, I'm in your studio and I did not see who the last speaker was in your program. I mean your news item. But look, what the military chiefs should understand is that nobody has asked them to take a decision or to set a date. They were only asked to prepare a plan, and their responsibility is to take that plan to their principals, the ECOWAS heads of states. In a situation like this, I would advise the military chiefs to avoid public comments. All they could have said, if they were, clever politicians, would have said, look, we finished our meeting, we have no comments to make. And at the appropriate time, they report to their principals, the heads of state. They are the ones who are going to take the decision whether to go to war or not to go to war. They are the ones who are going to renew the threats if they decide that that's what they want to do. But as of today, they have an option. They have an alternative in the sense that the Nigerian leadership of today has offered their negotiating position. What ECOWAS needs to do going forward is now to try and engage them based on what they have put on the table. And I think that the fact that they have received the former head of state and his delegation is a good omen. It's a starting point where you think of how negotiation works.
I think it's a fine place because the military chief, specifically in Accra, used these words: "We're ready to storm Niger Republic." And now it looks as if ECOWAS has also not brought forth some people with some form of knowledge in diplomacy. As you rightly put it, the military chiefs were not meant to give in such a situation. How can that be remedied? Because it would seem as if it's already causing more chaos in the whole process than peace.
No. Look, the only time we should be worried is what comes out when they report to the Council of Heads of States and the decision emanating from that council meeting. But for now, what the military chiefs have said, worrisome as it is, shouldn't concern us much. What we should look at is the details they provide to the heads of states when they do meet, and the decision taken by the heads of state. But the point I'm trying to make today is that whether you call it the noise or the positions coming out from Niger, is the leadership of Niger today, they have placed on the table their negotiating position. It is now left to ECOWAS to engage them and see whether they can narrow the differences. For one or two reasons. Number one, if you go around the region, very few people, if any at all, is in favor of military option. Secondly, I think ECOWAS leaders need to broaden their mindset and conversation on this issue. Americans have troops on the ground. The French have troops on the ground. America has just appointed an ambassador to Niger. But then, cleverly, they said he will not present her papers to the new leadership, but will be there serving as an ambassador to a regime that everybody is condemning. I mean, we need to think about this. And that she will be helping to dialogue with the powers that be. So what does that tell you? What does that tell you? It tells you a lot about the fact that even in this matter, those who are saying to us, we support everything we want to do, they are also playing to protect their own national interests in Niger. So we should be clever about this. And I've always made this point, and I do not want to sound like a broken record. How come that a coup took place where you have the French on the ground, you have the Americans on the ground, and they did nothing, and now we are trying to go in with the same people still on the ground? I think our leaders need to broaden their conversation and on this issue, and think, globally about the consequences of what they want to do. But again, I make the point, sanctions do work.
All right.
Negotiations also work, and they should pursue the two.
Well, while they pursue the two, some of the key concerns people will want to hear from you is, are you saying for the fact that the French troops were there and the American military base, is that indicative of getting some kind of internal protection for the government of Niger? And quickly, if what the Nigerian leaders, coup leaders have said about, having a transition, a 3-year transition period, is that also indicative that the end of Mohamed Bazoum as president is over?
Well, look, it's very simple. When a coup takes place, that's the end of that regime to start with. It's normal, it's natural everywhere in the world that coups are taking place. That's the end of the regime. The only thing that, as part of the negotiation going forward, is to ensure that the president, has the right to contest again if he wants to contest. And if he wins, all be it. The point I'm trying to make about the Americans and the French is that, look, they have troops on the ground when the coup took place. We need to be convinced that they were not aware this was going to happen. And I refuse to believe, personally, knowing the French Secret Service and the CIA, that they had no clue this coup was going to take place and did nothing about that. But now we are saying we are going to send military troops in a country where you have the key two players of these countries right there on the ground. But that's not the main concern now. The Americans have also appointed an ambassador to Niger, that it clearly indicates that they have slightly changed their position, the position they had initially. Now they are more concerned about their own national interest, which is what they want to protect. And are you now going to begin to go in spite of all this? No, you should also begin to think of your own interest. Why would they appoint an ambassador now at a time in which globally there's a condemnation of the coup? I mean, these are questions we should be asking ourselves. And when you begin to find the answers, you begin to understand how global politics works, that everybody is protecting its own self-interest. And we have an obligation to do the same for us. Now, if our leaders saying that military action is part of protection of our self-interest, I always like to refer to Animal Farm. They are the brain workers, so they know exactly what to do. They have all the answers. They have all the information, which we don't have. So whatever they decide to do, in spite of all advice that they are receiving from everybody who is familiar with this situation.
Some of the key concerns it will be if it does tilt towards the last option, which is, put boots on the ground. How does it work in a country whereby we have seen an overwhelming support by the citizens of the people for the coup leaders?
We need to be very careful about that word overwhelming support for the leaders. Look, Suleiman, if I want to organize a rally for myself in this country, given I know some of the areas I can go to in this country, in Lagos or in Abuja, to mobilize people to come out and give me the kind of support or demonstration that I want to do. So when you see a stadium packed full of people, and it's not a football match to start with, even football match in Niger does not attract such a crowd. You don't have to be told that this was very well organized by the military leadership themselves. They ensured they provided the money for the buses to convey as many people as possible in order to give that impression that they are enjoying overwhelming support. But look, that's not the issue really. The issue is that they are today's leaders, and everybody in Niger, just like in Nigeria, they have those who have welcomed the coup have their reasons for welcoming the coup. those who are against it also have their reasons for for being against it. You know, so the whole question of overwhelming, no, we should be very careful about that, because when these things happen, you know, the new leadership takes care, make sure that they ginger up the people to demonstrate in support of what they've done. And they know the points to, to press and get people to support them. It has happened in this country. It has happened in other places where coup has taken place. So this is not strange, actually. It's part of the game. You know, it's part of the game that is played by nations and leaders, by the way.
Ambassador Keshi, why people are, circumspect or a little bit careful using that word or that phrase? Shouldn't Africa, especially West Africa, be also careful, knowing full well that the last option should be erased, talking about military option? Keep in mind, Ukraine and Russia, everyone thought that military operation was going to be for 2 weeks, but as we speak, it's gone over a year.
Again, you speak to the point that I made earlier, that our leaders should broaden their minds, their conversation, and give reasoned consideration to whatever decision they are going to make on this issue. You've pointed out to Ukraine. Absolutely, you're right. Putin thought he was going to overrun Ukraine, within a week or two. 2 years on, he has not even been able to capture 50% of the territory of Ukraine. And so that should actually put a caution, not just on the leadership, but on the military chiefs that are sounding, we are ready, to do this and that. Maybe I should say this. Maybe what some of the reasons why some of these, military chiefs, particularly from other parts of ECOWAS, are sounding like this is the fact that they were not part and parcel of ECOWAS experience. Nobody knew when Nigeria, Ghana, and later, Sierra Leone sent about 100 or 200 people. Nobody knew we were going to spend 10 good years at a huge cost to this country. 10 good years at a huge cost to this country. Nobody knew, so these things will happen. So when the military is saying we are ready, we want to go to war, I appeal to them to calm down, let the leaders sort out things. If the leaders decide, as I said before, they are the brain workers, they have all the information, they know what they do. If they decide that's what they want to do, they will give orders to the military. What the military should be doing today is not making the noise they are making. They should be strategizing and planning, how do we go into this and end this quickly? If you read the book of Collins Powell, he was very clear about 2 or 3 things the military should do in operations like this, based on his own experience in Vietnam. Number 1, you must define your objective. Number 2, if you are going in, you must also decide. You must also decide your exit. We did not do that in Liberia and Sierra Leone. We spent 10 years. Putin did not do that. He has spent 2 years fighting Ukraine. And I sincerely hope we can all learn from that.
Try to close, because some of the key concerns you've raised are things that the government and leaders of ECOWAS must remember and put on the table. I recall the spillover. I was at the Oru refugee camp in Ogun State, and you can imagine the spillover of that crisis in Liberia and Sierra Leone. But again, we're talking about Niger that's just bordering about 7 states, at what that could mean, especially in the terms of displaced people and refugees and the fight against insurgency. As we close, who else should we be speaking to, as some of these ECOWAS leaders seem to be talking tough? We heard Al-Hassan Ouattara the other time. So what should be the language to these leaders concerning the imbroglio in Niger? Ambassador Keshi.
I think we have a good negotiator in the person of the former head of state, General Abubakar, by the way, is a very good, quiet, soft-spoken, negotiator. He can be very persuasive, So I just think that, the way this game is played, once he's reported to, the president of Nigeria, the responsibility of the president and his team is to reassess the message they have received. And they could actually send him back to say, okay, before the next ECOWAS meeting, this is our position on this. So that will also enable the president in the next ECOWAS meeting to say, I've also engaged them bilaterally. This is the report I want to make. We are making progress, but we still need to keep the military option on the table, but let's continue to pursue dialogue and see where we can get to. And I want to emphasize, the 3 years they have given themselves is a negotiating position. And it's now left to ECOWAS to figure out how to deal with that issue. And by the way, Suleiman, why this thing is important, some of these things we are discussing. Coup took place in Burkina Faso, Guinea, and other places. Nobody threatened military adventure. Why this? Now, if a coup takes place in a country like Senegal or in Ivory Coast today, is ECOWAS going to go in? If the answer is no, then sending military to Niger today should also be no.
So leave it to Ambassador Joe Keshi. Many thanks for expanding this for us here on This Day Live.